Hey there, welcome to the MacroFactor App review video. This is going to be an in-depth review of the features, and it's kind of just my first impressions. The app was just released last week, so this is hot off the press. Also, quick side note before we begin, make sure that you check the description before you make a comment, because it's very possible that I could make a mistake on here. I'll try to comment if there's something wrong or they change things or fix things based off of what I'm recommending in this video. Okay, so with that being said, full disclosure before we start here, I'm a big fan of the co-creators behind the MacroFactor app, Greg Nuckols and Eric Elbows. Eric is known for his venerable Stronger by Science podcast with his background in nutrition, and Greg is a special temporary guest who has thus far remained undefeated against the competition for guest co-hosting on the show, most likely due to his connections with big data and his clout as the creator of the mass research journal for all things lifting. Now, some of you may say in the comments that, David, you got it all wrong. Eric's last name is Trexler, but we all know that is actually his previous name before he was on his road to enlightenment. So that being said, let's continue on with the review. Before we begin, I am a big fan of Greg and Eric's from their Stronger by Science podcast. So when I heard that they were coming out with a sexy new diet tracking app, naturally I was pretty excited. And then when they told me that there was going to be a beta test coming out, I was going to be all over that. But unfortunately, I guess it just wasn't cool enough to get in on the beta. But hey, you can always check these people on the website. Apparently they got in, they're beta testers, they're happy. Maybe they should do a review video. David Vanderhayden here with Sloppy Seconds, and today I'm going to be talking about my initial thoughts on the MacroFactor app. So part one of this video is going to be a rundown of all the features that I like, some of the things that I'd like to see them improve, and some of the things that I already know that they are working on and we're likely to see an update on in the future. And since it's going to take a while for it to track my weight across time and adjust everything with the calculations and the algorithms that they have, I'm going to hold back on doing a full review of the app for now, because a few months from now, I plan on coming out with another video that's going to focus on, okay, like how is their algorithm adjusting and how is it using calculations to change my recommendations over time. And that's also going to give Greg and Eric's team a chance to add those extra features that I know that they're working on, and also hopefully based off the feedback that I give in this video, make some changes to the app, because there are some things that I would like tweaked and some features that are definitely missing and things that could be expanded on. So without further ado, let's get into some of the features and let's get into the rest of the video here. So first of all, let's talk about price. It's pretty comparable to other apps, premium versions like MyFitnessPal and the Carbon app, and there's a whole list of different apps that you can check out that are reasonably priced around the $10 range. We'll go into the exact prices in a bit here, but if there's a graphic that I could put up right here, it will show you the differences between the different apps. But yeah, here's the chart showing the price difference between MacroFactor and its competitors. Those prices will likely vary, and again, make sure you check the description down below to see what the updated prices are and stuff like that. Or maybe they're having discounts, like, hey, you know, maybe they'll have a discount code for me to use on here. Haha. Check the description down below, please. Again, the description, please, please, please. I don't know why it sounded like Bane from Batman. Do you feel in charge? So if the price is pretty similar to all these other apps, really all that's gonna set them apart is the features, right? So I was gonna talk about all the features that make MacroFactor different than their competition, but actually Greg and Eric are one step ahead of me, and they made this handy little chart comparing them to all of the other four most popular food logging apps, which are the juggernaut that is Under Armour's MyFitnessPal, the Carbon app, which was developed by bodybuilder Lane Norton and Holly Baxter, Chronometer, which is used by a lot of nutrition coaches, and the Renaissance Periodization Diet app, aka the RP Diet app, which is developed by Mike Israetel and friends. So the first thing we're going to talk about is arguably what can make or break an app, the most important thing, which is its database. So when you're trying to look something up, does something pop up and is it something that's accurate, right? So MacroFactor is the only one that has a verified only food listing database. So Carbon also has this, but basically it's the idea that you can look something up and know that the listings that are on there are all curated by professionals and not just crowdsourced things that people are uploading willy-nilly, not really verifying the contents, okay? Now, having a database that is valid, reliable, and extensive can make or break a food logging app, and MacroFactor's database is amazing in its validity because they only allow professional results to show up. But since they're currently only fully supporting US databases, they aren't as reliable for international users that are looking for more local brands of food. Now don't get me wrong, you can find all sorts of international foods using the US database, but if you're in the UK or Australia, which are English-speaking countries, you may not still be able to find what you're looking for, and you may want to wait for MacroFactor to add to its database over time. But not all hope is lost, because there is a hack if you really like using MacroFactor's app's equations and its presentation and its user interface, where you can import data from another app like MyFitnessPal using MyFitnessPal's larger database, and then you can import that into the MacroFactor app. Basically, you enter in food into another app like MyFitnessPal, which then syncs the data with Fitbit, which then imports its data back into MacroFactor. At least this is what I understand, so that you can still have the best of both worlds, where you have access to the larger database, but also you have access to all the slick features of MacroFactor. So yeah, that's the first kind of glaring weakness. It's the double-edged sword of using the verified-only database, is that MacroFactor doesn't have quite an extensive database as MyFitnessPal. But MyFitnessPal also relies on crowdsourced custom entries, so anyone can enter a food in. So you have to be a little bit skeptical when you're using an app like MyFitnessPal and you don't see an entry that has a little blue check mark next to it, because you don't know if it's actually something that's verified and reliable. So it can be a little tricky using user-generated content that you'd find on a database like MyFitnessPal. But as a new user to an app, there's nothing more frustrating than running a search and finding 0 results. So even user-generated content in MyFitnessPal can make you feel better when something pops up in the search results. One thing that I do like about the MacroFactor app is that their database has pictures next to everything, or most things except for custom entries. But sometimes a product label is listed in a somewhat ambiguous way with its wording, and you're not really sure if it's a perfect match. And just seeing that little picture reassures me that yes, I am looking at the right item. Also, the pictures make it easier to view the listed item in the diary without it just being a wall of text. So let's talk about those features, and I'll try to do a quick rundown of the features from here on out, because I know I spent a lot of time talking about the database. So the first feature that we're going to talk about is custom macro programs. So MacroFactor has a custom macro program that adapts to your goals. It remains to be seen whether or not these custom macro recommendations are better or worse, but I do trust Greg and Eric to give good recommendations. It's just simply a matter of how it compares to the competition. There's also going to be a copy and paste function, so this just makes it easier for you to drag one item to another section of the app, or like a different day. I know that MyFitnessPal was always kind of a pain in the butt when I used to try to copy and paste using their function, because it would want me to copy and paste, but it wouldn't let me go to anywhere I wanted. It would pigeonhole it into lunch or dinner, or it would just get kind of tripped up here and there. And this isn't really a MyFitnessPal video, but I do like the copy and paste function that they have on the MacroFactor app. Anyways, the next feature we're going to be talking about is the full micronutrient reporting, which I guess only Chronometer Premium has, which makes sense because Chronometer is kind of one that's used a lot by fitness coaches, so they need to go into the most smallest amount of detail, the most granular sort of presentation as possible. But I do appreciate the fact that on the MacroFactor app, they list not just micronutrients, but they also give like a cool kind of breakdown of like protein. So for example, like proteins are made up of amino acids. They're the building blocks of protein. And you know, if you look in the literature, they always talk about leucine content, isoleucine, valine, these branched chain amino acids. And if you're a real nerd and you like to look into that stuff and see, okay, if I'm on a plant-based diet and I'm on the road to enlightenment like Eric, you know, then you'll be able to see whether or not you're getting the essential amino acids or different amino acids profiles that are of interest to you. If you're a real nerd, you can look into those stats, which is kind of cool. Now, one of the things that's kind of cool about MacroFactor is that they have a unique timeline style food log that doesn't lock you into a number of meals or snacks. So this actually was one of my biggest pet peeves when I started using MyFitnessPal and some of these other apps, is that I don't even eat breakfast. So I don't need a breakfast category, and I usually don't eat snacks. But rather than pigeonholing it into specific categories, they just have a little timeline where you can just enter everything that you just ate, you group it together, it's really slick, and then it just kind of groups that as just almost like a bolus of food, you know? It's like, that's the bolus of food that you ate. There's the chunk of food that you ate, and there it is in the timeline. So if you're like me and you skip breakfast because you're doing a 16 by 8 time-restricted feeding scheme, aka a type of intermittent fasting, then you appreciate it when you don't have to always ignore breakfast every single day and feel like you're missing out. So another feature that I really like about the MacroFactor app is the Smart History function. If you eat the same foods around the same time each day, the app actually remembers that and it suggests that food for you so that you don't have to always be looking it up. So for example, every day when I have my lunch or brunch or whatever you want to call it, I have a kale salad. So it would suggest, hey, do you want to have this same kale salad that you had the last 30 days in a row? Yes, I would. Thank you very much. And that combined with the copy and paste function saves you a lot of time. And that eliminates as much friction as possible so that logging doesn't feel tedious. Because that's the thing about these tracking apps is they get to feel very monotonous over time when you have to keep on entering in the same thing over and over again. So speaking of saving time, if you want to be as lazy as possible and not even scan the barcode or type things in, they have a feature that I've never seen in any other app, and it's called AI Describe. Ooh. Now what is AI Describe? So AI Describe uses AI technology to do voice to text, and it looks up items for you, and it's actually capable of adding multiple items at once to an extent. So like if you keep on talking, for some reason it kind of runs out of room. I don't know if this is just my problem from my testing, but if I say too much, it starts to kind of trail off and say, David, you're being a little long-winded. We can only add so much in here. But to an extent, it works very well, and I should expect that to improve over time because that's the thing about AI. They're always evolving, always. Anyways, it's really nice when it works, and if you're in a rush to add basic foods together, it's nice, but it is bound to make mistakes. For example, here I tried to manually read off some brand names and labels for the ingredients to a salad that I made, and although it did a good job looking for the generics, it couldn't find the exact brands that I mentioned, and the strawberry salad dressing was teased into separate listings for vinaigrette and the actual strawberries, so it definitely got a little bit confused, but I could see how that happens. Then when I tried to quickly enter in the same items into the database using barcodes, it found everything perfectly, except for these pumpkin seeds, which are a little tricky, and I had to enter those in manually. And here's some footage of me just manually entering in all the values so you can see what it looks like when you do have to create a custom food. But that brings me to the next great feature, which is adding in your own custom foods when the database can't find it. So here I searched for the pumpkin seed food item that I just made as a custom entry, and now it pops up in my database as a custom food when I search for it. So it actually suggests that. And by the way, it would be great if I could add my own custom picture into that listing as well. So Greg, Eric, Corey, that would be a nice feature. If you guys could add that in there, that would be much appreciated. Other than that, it's great. Another feature that the MacroFactor app is championing as the greatest thing since sliced bread, no pun intended, is the weight trending option, which gives you a nice clean line over time. So I'll show a picture here of when I did a screen capture of my weight tracking over the first few days, and as you can see, it was pretty consistent. I was in the middle of doing a cut where I was pretty low, and then I had a big meal, a big cheat day, where I went out, I had some steak, I had some chocolate cake, I had all the things, okay? But after that, my weight shot up. Now, instead of it showing me just this sharp and scary upward slope, it shows me a nice steady line. And I'd be interested to see how that changes over time, the weight trends, rather than just looking at these quick snap judgments on a graph, on a line graph, right? Now, I'm not sure exactly how the weight trending thing will work over time, but I do know that when you first sign up, they do give you recommendations for calories and stuff like that based off of a few simple questions that you have to answer at the beginning. I'll show a little video right now that shows those questions and that sign up process when you first start, just so you guys can get an idea of what you go through and what kind of questions they ask. So after answering all of the questions when you first sign up, they do give you an initial calculation for how many calories you're supposed to have. And that's actually one of their features that they are touting as a new and innovative sort of thing, is their calculations for energy expenditure. So MacroFactor has dynamic and science-driven energy expenditure calculations that are unbesmirched by Smartwatch data and simple equations, right? So they don't actually factor in things like smartwatch energy expenditure and stuff like that. They just look at energy input in there, and then they use that to and look at your weight trend, and they use that to determine how many calories you should be having. And of course, the macros, the macronutrients, the carbs, the fats, the proteins, that kind of stuff, you can tweak that however you want. So if you want to go in there, you want to manually edit things, go for it. They also allow you to give recommended amounts, if you want high, super high amounts of protein or just moderate, optimal protein levels. You can tweak all that stuff in there. Now, when I actually put my data in there, I have been tracking my calories for a while, and I do know just from experimenting what my baseline amount of maintenance calories is. So like when I looked at my recommendation, it was a little bit high, and I manually went in there and adjusted it. But I'll have to report back on how the app changes over time based off of my weight trends, because I gave it a certain amount of calories that is my maintenance right now, and then based off of how my weight changes, it should adapt that. But again, check my next video that I'm gonna do where I actually go into the results of that and how it changed over time and my impressions on whether or not that was accurate or even being that useful for tracking my weight over time. This simplified approach using fancy equations is something that I appreciate about the MacroFactor app. And one thing that I appreciate is that like the Carbon app and unlike MyFitnessPal, there is more than just a one-time calculation of calorie goals from when you sign up, which actually encourages people to only think about short-term weight loss when they don't dynamically adjust to their needs. And another feature that is really super simple and also appreciated is the fact that they finally put a dark mode on one of these apps. My God, like if you've ever been up late at night trying to enter in all of your data, it's been a long day, and the last thing that you need is to have this bright white light of MyFitnessPal right in your face, and you're trying to go to sleep and you're trying to remember everything, and it's just having the dark mode is such a nice appreciated feature. So thank you guys for incorporating dark mode. So hopefully that answered you guys' questions about the most important features, but there's bound to be people in the comments down below that are gonna have all these little nitpicky questions and little tiny questions. So I'm gonna do a quick rundown of that, and most of these answers are just ripped straight from their FAQ. So here's the rundown real quick. Question number one, why isn't it free? Because they don't sell your data, they don't use ads, and they don't want to pick between shitty free versions and full versions of stuff. They want to focus on the best experiences possible. Why no Smartwatch integration? Well, sort of. They have an integration with Fitbit and Google Health, but only for food. So none of the activity tracking, none of the energy expenditure factoring into your calories. Those Fitbits are not really that great at estimating energy expenditure anyways, and I've always found them to be a bit tedious when you're doing anything besides cardio or just running basically. So I'm not really too concerned about that. Another question, can I use MacroFactor on desktop? Well, the answer to that is not yet. Supposedly they're working on this, but one day they said they will add that in the future. And that's a pretty big deal if you're a nutrition coach, because you're probably already on your computer tracking all your clients' food data, so you want to be able to track your data as well. So the answer is no, there's no desktop app, there's no PC version, but they're working on it. Next question, can you load data from another app if you decide to jump ship? Well, only through the integration with Apple Health, Google Fit, Fitbit, and only the last 30 days worth of your data. So if you want to import the last 1,000 days because you're on a big streak for MyFitnessPal, I guess you're out of luck. But hey, you're jumping ship, so them are the breaks, right? Also, people have questions about them being adherence neutral. I think that this is something that Greg's talked about. I'm gonna refer to his stream that he did where he talked about their policy on adherence and stuff like that. But basically, you don't have to hit goals on the app perfectly. So if the app gives you a goal like the Carbon app and you don't perfectly hit that goal, it'll kind of freak out and be like, all right, well, you're off base, and it'll kind of make you feel a little bit judged because you're not hitting it, which some people need that accountability. But me personally, if I'm not adhering to it, it's probably on purpose, and I don't need the app telling me that I'm not adhering to it. So I think you know when you're kind of slipping, but I don't know, leave that up to you guys. The way that the MacroFactor approaches it is that you don't have to hit your goals perfectly. The equations just adjust on the fly if you're above or below your goals for calories and macros. So the updated calorie and macro recommendations are based on your actual energy intake and changes in your weight, not how well you stuck to their recommendations, okay? And I mean, in a way, that's less psychologically stressful to not have to worry about adherence anyways. I've never really worried about it, so maybe you shouldn't either. Now, so far I've talked about a lot of features that I like about the MacroFactor app. Let's talk a little bit about some of the downsides of the MacroFactor as it exists right now in its current state. So some areas that they could improve upon are, the first and most obvious limitation is that they have a limited database. And as I explained before, that's a problem that will likely improve over time as they can afford to buy more access to international databases. So my plan is to support them by keeping the app past this 2-week trial, and probably you should too if you're at this point in the video. So that's the first limitation, and the second limitation is the lack of nutrition coach client tracking support. So I am not a nutrition coach, but I am a certified personal trainer, and I would definitely love to take advantage of this feature instead of having my clients take screenshots and text them to me, which is incredibly tedious, especially for my older clients who have no idea how to take a scrolling screen capture, which, my God, if you've ever had like 7 texts for 1 day's worth of food sent to you via text, it's not something that's fun to experience. So I would love to see some sort of integration where I could keep track of all my different clients and they could just send me something other than a bunch of screenshots and I could import that data. I would love that feature. I'm sure it's something that they're working on. Again, check back in a few months when I've looked at all the different apps together to see if maybe they've upped their game and added this feature. You never know. So we'll see what happens. And also, this is kind of a nuanced topic, and maybe I'm nitpicking here, but I've noticed other people that are also in the Stronger by Science community Facebook page that have been posting about this as well, so I can't be the only person who has this problem. And that problem is you can't change the units that the app uses. This is a problem that's found in multiple apps. So if it lists something that's in grams, there's no way that I can write down pounds or ounces, etc., which is really annoying when you're entering meat in and you know like how many pounds and ounces it is, but you don't know how many grams. Or maybe you're like trying to do some kind of conversion, or you're trying to remember based off of just the size that you ate instead of weighing it on a scale, because weighing raw meat on a scale is kind of unsanitary and so on and so forth, and it's kind of a pain in the ass. But there's just nothing for like when you're eating an entire container of food too. So like if I'm eating something and it's just, there's a serving size and then there's like 10 servings per container, I can't just list the container. Like if I eat a whole thing of yogurt, I usually judge how much of the container I ate and not just how many grams or cups that I ate. So it'd be nice if they had some kind of conversion on there where you could either just see a conversion table, little cheat sheet, or a little calculator that you could use on there, or just something that simply when you put it in there, it offers all the different conversions for you to do, and you can just use a little drop down menu and you can just convert it. So like let's say I eat something that's in ounces and I want to convert that to cups, it's right there and I don't have to really monkey around with it. And that's just something in general that I think they can work on over time. On the interface specifically, I think that'd be very helpful, especially when you're trying to remember stuff that you ate earlier and you don't have the item in front of you anymore to look at, so you don't know how many servings are in the container and you also don't know like how many grams of it that you ate. Another thing that I'd like to see them add to the app in the future possibly is community support, because other than their awesome Facebook community and the Stronger by Science Facebook group or the subreddit for Stronger by Science, if you want to talk about the app specifically and maybe you're not even a fan of Stronger by Science and you just downloaded the app and you want to have some kind of community/friends aspect for social support and accountability, it'd be very nice to have these features, because when your friends are on there and you guys are all tracking together, it helps you keep each other accountable, it makes it a little bit more fun, and it'd be nice to see some kind of social integration, although I anticipate that's hard for them to develop for the developers of the app. So hopefully we'll see that in the future, but again, it's not really that big of a deal. It's just kind of something nice to see, and maybe they'll work on that once they address some of the other major issues like the database and stuff like that. And lastly, the feature that is most temperamental right now, but possibly the coolest and has the most potential, is the AI Describe feature. So the AI Describe feature will probably improve over time, but right now it is a little bit clunky. Like you try to use a really long voice recording and it kind of randomly cuts you off. So I'd like to see the ability to kind of like play and pause, or kind of just keep on adding more to the food log. And also I had a question, like, is there any way for me to keep adding to the diary without entering things one at a time using this feature? Because currently I can rapidly add food items by scanning the barcodes in, but I have to add things 1 or 2 at a time using the AI Describe feature, which is just kind of weird. But for right now, it's a pretty cool feature if you're just saying like, I want to have a 6-ounce steak with 6 ounces of blueberries. And you know, I'll put some footage of me doing that right here, because I think I did get some footage of me doing that exact example. And as you can see, like, it didn't do the nature ripe version of the blueberries, but hey, you know, it got pretty close. And I don't think the nature ripe blueberries were in the database. But I have found a lot of US stuff is in the database. It's just not as good as MyFitnessPal. Like, I tried using the Carbon app too to look up those same blueberries, and it wasn't in their database either. So these newer apps, these sexy new apps that are developed by people that I really look up to and admire, they just need a little bit more time to catch up with MyFitnessPal with the apps thing. But there was some items that was in the US database for MacroFactor that weren't in MyFitnessPal. So they do have some food items that aren't in there. So it does go both ways. It's not like you're only limited by using the MacroFactor app. So yeah, those are my thoughts about the MacroFactor app, my initial impressions, just based off of using it for the first few days here, and hopefully over time we'll see them make some improvements. I did give some feedback on some things I'd like to see them improve upon, and I will do a video in the future about some of the other features that I didn't talk about in this video, which are more getting into the ability to export your data into a spreadsheet and see how your recommendations change over time. So I'm going to cover that with an updated review in the future. I'm going to compare it to the Carbon app. I'm going to compare it to the MyFitnessPal app and see, with those apps, they also have those options to export, and hopefully I can compare them all together. But for now, I feel confident in recommending the MacroFactor app, even over household names like MyFitnessPal, but I don't know if I can give it a perfect 5 out of 7 rating just yet until I've done further research and testing. So stay tuned for part 2, where I compare all the apps after using each one for a few months, and part 3, where I'll explain how I use these apps for my personal training clients as well as for myself. So if you ever want to see just how I do my approach for food tracking, and to see if that changes after I do these apps, follow me. You can always subscribe to my channel here to get more content. If you appreciated me doing this video, it took a lot of work to get this out on time after they just launched, especially since I didn't get to that beta testing program, guys, Oh, and also, if you guys want to comment down below with your experiences using the app yourself and some of the things that you found, or neat little tricks or tracking things that you did, comment down below, because I'd love to see you guys discussing it down below, and I'll add to the discussion myself. And I'm sure there's stuff that I missed in this video in terms of showing you exactly how you group things together on the app and interact with it, and use the cool quick menu options on there where you can customize everything. So there's so much to talk about on this app, and I'm looking forward to covering it some more and doing more reviews like this in the future, as well as just giving you guys fitness advice. So of course, make sure you subscribe if you like this kind of content, like the video, comment down below, and remember, you only got one life to lift. Catch you in the next one, guys. Oh, I almost had it at the end there. Let me try that again. Come on, man, it's the tagline of your video. You got one life to lift. Catch you in the next video, guys.